Welcome to Worship Life, guys. Today we're talking about why you and your team should memorize your music.
Better not forget this message.
Whatever the intro music is. All right, today we have 3 points for why your team should memorize your music. 1, not memorizing music holds your team back musically. The truth of it is, if you don't know your music well enough to memorize it, then I don't think you know your music well enough. That's just the hard truth of it. When I've led worship from both ways, probably about 10 years of not memorizing music because I didn't think it was worth it. I didn't think it was beneficial. And then the last 3 or 4 years, I did memorize music. And the difference is it's really large. It's astronomical how much of a musical difference it is after you really start memorizing your music.
Yeah, and I think that when you're in a position where you're not comfortable with the music, or you're reading it off, it just opens you up to not be able to handle certain situations that come up in live. And when you're playing in front of other people live, there's always going to be things that either happen, like errors, bugs, maybe the vocalist missed their cue and you have to stretch out the verse a little bit longer, or maybe they want to extend a bridge or something of that nature. And if you're locked into this is how it's supposed to go on your music sheet, then that kind of hold you back and not be able to be as flexible, I think.
And that brings us to our second point. It allows your team to communicate well, both in rehearsal and in service. If you are just staring at your music, then you're not able to see what other people are doing. If you're thinking about the next chords, if you're reading ahead so that you know what you're doing, if you're constantly having to look down, then you're going to miss things and cues that your other team members are giving off. And if everybody's looking at music, then nobody can give cues.
Right.
Because they're just worried about, surviving in their own musical
Right.
bubble when they're not thinking about it as a whole team.
Right. I've seen it before where, if I'm not paying attention and someone's having technical issues and one of the guitarists is completely off, let's say he's fixing something on his board, then I, as the other guitarist, need to step up and fill out more space.
Right.
And I think that's a huge thing too. If you don't see what's going on, what other people are doing, you'll miss those, not just cues in music, but when things are going wrong.
Right. I mean, how many times in your band has the worship leader or the drummer or someone else been trying to build and people aren't building with them because they're not paying attention, or in the opposite end, when you build something up and then you want to drop it out, and you see the worship leader does this or something, or motions to the band, but they're not paying attention, so they still keep going, and so that's just a failed attempt.
Yeah.
So that brings us to point number 3, and that it is when you memorize your music, it enables you to participate in worship and also to lead worship. Yeah. Really, if you're staring at your music, it hinders your ability to be in the moment and actually worship. Right. And if you don't know your music well enough, how are you going to participate in that way? And if you're not participating in worship, then your congregation sure isn't going to feel like they should.
Right. Yeah. And I think it comes to say, as well, if you're teaching something to someone else, you need to know it better than the person you're teaching it to. And I think that could kind of also apply to when you're leading worship. They're looking at you and they're watching what you're doing. And I think when you're out there being energetic, involving God or worshiping, it shows them, okay, this is what we're going to do now, and it kind of leads them into that experience. And that's what we're called to do, is for a bigger purpose than just play music. We're here to help bring the presence of the Lord out to the congregation and have them have a better experience.
Right. And in my opinion, anything that helps your team lead worship and engage your congregation in worship is something that you should do, no matter how difficult. And memorizing music, while it may seem daunting, especially when you haven't done it before, it gets much easier over time.
Right.
To put this in perspective, a few years ago, we had a large transition in our team where we went from having a practice on Thursday nights to having no practice. And then on Sunday mornings, we just had a run through. And so it was expected that you would come with your music very memorized and also very prepared in general, so that it wasn't a practice when we came together. It was a run through. It was going through everything and making sure that it worked well. And at the beginning, it was difficult, especially for some people who hadn't even been memorizing their music before that time. And while it may have suffered musically for a month or two, once people really understood the expectations and started memorizing the music and started putting enough time in, then things actually got better than they were before with the practice, because the expectation was there, the level of commitment was there, and overall the communication got better. Everything was improved.
Yeah, definitely. I think everything glued together. And also, as a musician in a worship band, it was also a call to action to take this more seriously. Like, what are we doing here? We're not here just to play music and have fun, though we do have fun as a worship team. But we're here to do something more than that. And I felt it was a call to take this a little bit more seriously, take the time out of your week to make sure you're ready. And then that allows you to just do all the things that we covered about fill in when things happen wrong, or just be present with the Lord and doing your job as a worship leader.
Absolutely. So those were our 3 reasons for you and your team to memorize your music, and I hope that you find it helpful and beneficial for your team. Thanks, guys.